Do you want to maybe give like a rough overview? I mean, I don't know you very well. I know we've talked a little bit on Instagram and stuff, but I certainly am excited to hear more about your journey and how you do life. But I know a lot of people that are watching this, listening to this, are going to have no idea who you are as well.
Yeah.
So do you want to give like a rough overview of just who you
Yeah,
are?
sure. Okay, so I am Alicia, and I'm Little Women Farmhouse on Instagram, and well, Disology actually was the one that recommended me.
That's
So
right.
I'm
Yeah.
probably not your typical person on here. I homeschool. I have four daughters, and I homeschool them. And homeschooling is actually really what led me to, I mean, it's not the only thing that led me to where I am, but it was what started my decolonization, and that I
Mm,
actually decolonized before I deconstructed.
okay.
Um, and so, yeah, I grew up evangelical. Yeah, I have a very evangelical family. And I know you talk a lot, or you share a lot of information that says a lot of people at Deconstruct were like the most involved in church. And that's definitely true for me. Uh, Taylor, who is New Transcendentalist on Instagram, he one time shared, he took like Paul's Philippians 3 about being like Hebrew of Hebrews.
Yeah.
And he like flipped, like he rewrote it as like being Christian of Christians.
That's funny.
And, you know, it's all like, it's worth losing all of that for what you gain.
Mm.
And I really resonate with that. So yeah, I grew up going to church all the time, and I was very involved. I read my whole Bible through as like an elementary kid.
Wow.
Yeah, I was just very serious. And yeah, like and actually I didn't really even necessarily have that modeled for me. Like my parents did all of the, you know, the things that you do as evangelical Christians, but like I never saw them reading their Bibles. I just
Mm.
knew that's what you're supposed to do, and so I wanted to do it. I like said I like taught my sister when she was like 3 how to say the prayer, and like said the prayer with her. Like I was like
Nice. Good.
terrified.
Cover
She
your
was
bases
right.
early, you know?
Yes, I covered them early, and I like always resaid the prayer just to be safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely like had some fear there. And then yeah, and then as like I got older, I did mission trips and ministry trips, and I was like on the board for a pregnancy center, and just like everything that I could do.
Wow.
I went to youth group, um, and then I went to college, and I went to a Christian college, and I was like, I want to do missions with my life. So that's then what I started heading toward. And I got married young, because that's what you do. So I got married
Mm-hmm.
at 20, and we like started training to do tribal missions. So I was like, um, I was already disenamored with the church in some ways. Like I read my Bible so much, and like it didn't fit with what I was seeing like Christians actually living. Like they were all like, just, I live in America. So they're all just going after the American dream, and like looking
Mm.
for bigger houses, and you know, buying new clothes. And I didn't see that in my Bible, you know? So I was like, I think like doing tribal missions is like the most Christian thing I can do. And it felt
Right.
like I was a little bit sick of American Christianity. And so I was like, I think I was like looking for what like was really serving God. And that felt like
Mm.
the most I could, like, not like I was trying to please God, but that I was trying to like actually make sense of like, what is really following Jesus look like? And
Yeah.
nothing, what I was seeing didn't seem to match up with that. So,
Mm.
yeah, so did several years of training for doing missions. We were going to go to Papua New Guinea. We actually did go over
Wow.
there like to check it out for a month, and I loved it. I just thought it was like awesome to feel like you were really doing something. um, and yeah, and then like all those plans came crashing down, and that was in like 2014, and I felt like there was like, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Like, I felt like
Wow.
there was like, that was the only like plan I had for what it meant to like live out this Christianity. And then I felt like I was like stuck here in America.
Wow. So what made was it just circumstantial, the plans falling through, or was that stuff?
It was marriage issues.
Okay.
And actually, like, I had made some bad decisions. And so that actually was some of what, that was one of the things that like stirred up my deconstruction, because, at that time, like, people came around me and they were like, just telling like my feelings didn't matter. My feelings meant nothing. And my feelings were evil. And I had like so much conflict in that time because I thought like I knew God. I'd read my Bible through so many times, and everybody's like telling me like, your feelings are so wrong, which meant I was wrong. And I was like, well, how can I possibly, like, what more can I do to know God, you know?
Yeah.
And so I just felt like I'm just like evil to my core. And so it felt like really disheartening to me. And also like, I just had to totally disassociate from my feelings, which is just a very confusing thing, because then what do I trust? Like if my feelings are just so bad, then I just can't trust anything, which means I just am supposed to trust somebody else. And who do I trust? And, so when I started like actually, I read books and I listened to different people who like therapists, and actually started listening to my feelings and understanding my feelings. That was a huge change for me of knowing myself. So, yeah. So anyways, that was one thing. I also, had a Lutheran friend. Like, so a few years ago, I became pretty good friends with somebody who's a Lutheran. And it's amazing how much, like, when you grow up evangelical, and I think like other fundamentalist groups could say the same, you know, if you grew up Mormon or whatever, but how like everybody you know is evangelical for me.
Yeah.
So, you know, like I knew like one Catholic in college, and like, you know, so I knew like a few other people, but like, I mean, let alone like knowing any Muslims, you know, or anybody outside of Christianity. So, yeah, like even other facets of Christianity were demonized. And so like, I didn't really know many people, at least not well, that weren't evangelical. And so, and I went to public school, so I wasn't like completely sheltered, but yeah, so I met this lady and I got to know her pretty well. And she was another mom, and she homeschooled, and I loved how she like just was raising her children, and she was Lutheran. So I just started asking her some questions, because at this point I'm already like just questioning things. I've kind of always questioned things. And I've done your spiral dynamics course, which is excellent. Everybody should understand spiral dynamics, and you do a good job of explaining it. And you talk about how like what happens is you like hit the ceiling, and you just like you can't go anywhere else in what you're the spiral, the color you're in or whatever. And so you just like have to bust out of it. And I felt like that with evangelical Christianity. Like I just like was hitting the ceiling with everything I knew. And I had these questions and they couldn't be answered in the box I was given. Yeah. So, yeah. So I started asking her some questions. So she like believed in infant baptism and loss of salvation. And those are things that like, literally like with my upbringing, I thought like might mean you weren't saved and you might not go to heaven. Deal breakers. Yeah. And so I'm like to this point now where I'm like, okay, like help me understand, you know, how you believe these things. And so she starts telling me like, they baptize infants because, they're being born into a Christian family. And so the assumption is like, if you're a little child and you're born into a Christian family, you're going to accept all these truths that your parents give you. It's all that you know, it's all you're being taught. And so you are essentially a Christian. And then as you get older, you will actually be able to like think about all these things on your own. And, you know, apart from your parents, and you might decide these things are not for me and I don't want to believe this. And so then they believe in loss of salvation because you can choose to reject it. And like hearing that all together, like I kind of heard it separately, like infant baptism is really bad and it's not right because it should be believers baptism, and like lost salvation is really bad because it should be once saved, always saved. And like hearing it together like that, I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. And so, and in some ways I was like, it even makes more sense because now I'm raising my own kids. And I was thinking like, and seeing like, of course they're going to accept the things I tell them. Like it's all they know. It's all they hear. And then even like struggling some in my own faith walk at that point with, I had gone to Papua New Guinea and I had gone to Africa and I had gone to these other places. And I had been told like that, I was kind of raised more with the idea that like I chose God, like I chose to become a believer. But then I started attending a Calvinist church, and there were things that were good about it because it was a little bit different from when I was raised. So I was able to start like seeing that Christians see things a little different. But one of the things about Calvinism is that they believe that you're chosen by God. And so then I had this idea that like, I'm special and I'm chosen, and like there was nothing I could do and about it. And it's just like, a wonderful thing that I'm supposed to thank God for. And I just started having problems with all of these beliefs because I'm like, well, on one hand, like if I'm chosen, like why me, like why am I chosen? But then if I choose God, like, I don't really think I chose God. Like I didn't have a lot of, like my family all believed it. And like, it was basically expected of me. Everybody I knew believed in God. I'm growing up in America. So like, I don't really feel like
your choices weren't that diverse, right?
Yeah. Right. I think it was kind of like
unlikely you were going to turn 4 and go, I've been really thinking about Hinduism. Could someone teach me about that? I've never heard of it before, but I'm thinking that's the direction I'm going to go.
What I'm going to choose. Yeah. Yeah. And, I think a lot and I'm logical. And so I'm just like logically, like, it just makes sense that that's probably what I chose. And so then, likewise, if you just keep going down that path, you're like, well, if you grow up in a Muslim country, you're probably going to become Muslim. And so we had a missionary friend that came and visited us. And he was telling us how like he had a friend that was like, well, don't you really struggle with the fact that like all these people are going to be going to hell? And just because they never heard. And he was telling us, that his response was like, well, we all just deserve to go to hell. And so like, I actually just like to think about it, like about how like, I'm just like so thankful that even though that's what I deserve, that like God saved me from that. Like, actually, I'm just so fortunate that I'm not going to hell, like, because I was saved from that. And I'm like, I'm at the point now when he's sharing this, like, this is like 2 years ago or something, where I'm like, do you hear yourself?
Right.
Like, this is easy for you to say because you're one of the chosen ones.
Yeah. It's a really surreal thing, right? Because I thought that for years, and somehow that was an okay answer. Like, it was on some level, like I couldn't break through like the cognitive dissonance going on to make that just a good answer. And people were going, really, does this feel good? And I'm like, no, it is. It's a great answer. Yeah. It's perfect. It's completely flawless. And then you come out the other side and you're like, what was I smoking? Like, how the heck did that all add up to like, yeah, sure, fine, no problem. Yeah. Like, we couldn't possibly go, couldn't God just save everyone? Is that not an option? Or could God not create some people, evil? Or I don't know, like, it's a very weird concept that we just can't see outside of this little box. Yeah. But it is the way it is, right?
Yep. There's like a lot of disassociation you have to do. You have to like kind of shut down in some ways in order to accept all that. And I feel like, now I can see some of those ways where I was like, why would I not have thought about this more, questioned this more? But yeah, when you're told that like your eternity hinges on it, that's like that's a big deal.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
And I think in many ways that at least in the faith tradition that I grew up in, that, I was taught to not really be a thinker, and to just accept these truths. And so I was afraid.
So you weren't allowed to feel and you weren't allowed to think.
Yeah.
There's not much left for you to do, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you could think, okay, so, Rachel Held Evans says in one of her books, like, about how we were given all the answers before we were even asking them. And so, like, evangelicalism and I think like a number of Christian traditions, they just know now that, like, we live in this age where we are like, we're supposed to have answers. And so they are like, oh, we need to make sure you have these answers. And she, like, her first book is all like kind of hinges off the Monkey Scopes trial. And so at that, like, basically Christians came out looking kind of stupid because they didn't have an answer to science. And so, like, I think that was one of the things that kind of like kicked Christians to start like having answers. And so, like, they created all these answers, and now what they do is they just like hand them to us, like these budding children, evangelical children. And they're like, these are all the things you need to believe. And so, you know, you're 18 and you have like all these answers, but you actually weren't even asking them yet. And so then, like, you know, you're 18 and you're going out and like I did ministry trips and stuff, you know, and you're given all these answers that you have, and you haven't even like lived life yet.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like why we see a lot of us, you know, a little older, and now, you know, we were like hardcore Christians and we gave all those answers to people. And now we're deconstructing because we spent a lot of time in all that, you know, we really actually cared a lot about it. And it was like our whole life. And then we hit the ceiling.
Yeah. Well, it's all the more to deconstruct, right? The more fervently you go after this, the more is your entire world, the more your identity's wrapped up in it. Like, you know, if you're I'm trying to think, probably like people call it like nominal Christianity, right? You say you're a Christian, but you're not really truly like one of us, you know, however people saw that. But someone that is just like, oh, I go to church on Sunday, I don't really give that much of a crap. Like, I'll say a prayer every now and again, especially if I've lost my keys or freaking out or whatever. But I'm good. Like, but that person has so much less to deconstruct than the person that is like, every decision I make, I'm questioning what's in God's will, what's not in God's will. Every person I meet, I'm going, how can I save them? Every spare moment I'm spending, I'm beating myself up for watching Netflix when I could have read my Bible or whatever it is, you know. That person has a lot more stuff, like, as far as their internal reality to work through and to kind of like integrate post kind of waking up to maybe that it's not all positive. I think that's probably the nicest way I could say it. But it sounds like you were an all or nothing person, because I like all or nothing people, because I'm an all or nothing person. I'm like, who's got time for people that don't commit like to what they believe? But it sounds like you were like, you threw yourself at this. You're like, okay, well, and I think I always had that approach to Christianity a lot of the time. The reason I ended up moving to America from the UK, and I gave up a business, I walked away from like a lot of money on the table, and I was like, no, I don't think I'm supposed to have any money. I feel like that's just like a whole distraction. I need to like just give myself to the Lord. And I moved to California because there was a school that did like they taught in supernatural stuff and healings, and I was reading these books and I'm like, people can heal today? That's in the Bible, I guess. But I'm like, but that happens today? I'm like, what the hell are Christians doing then? Like, why aren't we clearing out hospitals and curing cancer and stuff? And I was like, I'm quitting everything I do and I'm just going to go there and learn. Because, like, if I can cure cancer, you know, if I can heal people that are dying, why would I be a IT manager? Why would I learn to be an accountant or, you know, like whatever, that was like
right? my being of like missionary. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, all or nothing, right? You're like, but there's people in another country that are going to die Muslim or whatever. I need to go get them saved, right? It's this epic hero complex. But of course, we love that, you know, people like to be the hero. But it makes sense. And in a sense, I have much more respect in some ways for someone that is a zealot. Like I've often said, I actually really admire people like the Westboro Baptist Church, because you know what? They really believe it. Yeah. I never was a Christian. I believed what they say. I believed people were going to hell, but I didn't go and like, you know, yell at them at their loved one's funeral. I'm like, geez, like that's intense. They really believe, right? You could argue they have some ulterior motives and stuff going on as well, but you know, like I admire that. I don't think it's healthy, right, good, any of those like adjectives, but you can't question it. They really are going after what they believe. And I do think it's really interesting with someone that is like that, deconstructs. It is so much more of a, you know, a smash against a brick wall. That this is just like, whoa, this is my whole life we're talking about here when you start to pick it apart, right? You've trained for years as a missionary. You went to Christian college, you know, I mean, you got in the system. What was that like? I mean, what did it start looking like as things started to unravel for you? Like, how did you go through that? And what was falling apart? Like, what were some of the key kind of things that were causing you to lose?
Yeah. So, okay. So, so it was about, a year and a half ago, I guess I would say, that I like just like hit the ceiling or like pulled the last string, whatever we call it, you know, where I was just like, I'm not okay, like shoving this all down anymore. So I think like you haven't done a lot with the Enneagram, I think, from what you've shared, but the Enneagram was also something big for me. So, I discovered the Enneagram like everybody. And I realized, that I'm a 9, which means like I'm a peacekeeper. And, one of the things I realized is like a 9 is like the perfect Christian woman. So like we're a peacekeeper. We don't speak up, especially in conflict, unless we're like called on to, and we can see like all sides of a situation. So like it's just like kind of easy for us to like give grace, or like to believe somebody when they tell us like our feelings are all wrong. And wow. And so like realizing that I was a 9, like I always thought, okay, I like actually had these feelings where I was like, man, I feel bad for some people because I just think it's so easy for me to be a Christian. Like I had, you know, some friends where it was just like it was just hard. They just like always wanted to rebel, or, you know, they were like always depressed. And I just was like, I actually feel like it's just kind of easy for me to be a Christian because of my personality. And so when I discovered the Enneagram, I actually like realized some of these things that I thought were like healthy were unhealthy parts of my personality. Yeah. Like I didn't know how to speak up about my wants. I didn't even sometimes know myself. Like I just knew what everybody else made me and wanted me to be. And until I realized, I guess until I really realized that people see the world differently, and realize like that this is a specific way I see the world, and that actually like some of these qualities are, you know, that I kind of was told were healthy, you know, and these are good things. Like you're a great submissive wife and a great submissive woman, and you listen to, you know, all the men in your life, you know, that were even praised, you know, and I realized, oh, these aren't actually healthy qualities. I don't know myself. I don't speak up when I need to. I'm just trying to keep everybody happy, you know, and like spinning 100 plates at one time to keep everybody else happy. And so I was kind of like contemplating all of that and working on like trying to be like healthier in that. And then I read, I have a friend that I went to college with, to the Christian college, and he wrote a book. His name is Stephen Copeland, and he wrote a book called Where the Colors Blend. And now I can say it's basically his deconstruction journey, but I didn't quite have that language then. I was just like, this is cool. Somebody I went to college with wrote a book, you know, but I read it, and so because of my personality and because I'm not black and white, I'm a very gray, I see the world in gray. Sure. I could like empathize with him. And I was like, you know, like, as I read the book, I could kind of see some of the things he was saying, but it scared me. Like it really scared me. But I also, about the same time, read Rob Bell's What is the Bible? I think that's what it's called.
Okay. Yeah.
And also the same thing where like I wanted to be open mind, but I felt like I was like reading, like obviously I'm like reading the book normal, but I felt like metaphorically I'm like reading it like this. Like
sure,
I'm like,
yeah.
Like kind of reading it.
Don't get too into this.
Right? Like I'm just trying to understand them. So I was ready to kind of dive in, but I was definitely scared because I felt like everything I believed hinged on this. Like my whole life, I believed everything I was doing hinged on this. And so I read both of them. And then I kind of felt like when I finished them, I needed like a little break. But I also felt like I was ready to like dive into this. Like I'm not living this like life anymore where I don't ask questions, where I shove down the questions, where I'm just like satisfied to take what everybody gives me. Like I'm like, that's not even true belief, like true belief is really, like diving in and asking the scary questions and then deciding, if I accept this or not. And so actually I had a friend that was sharing some of your posts. And so I found your Instagram, and then I saw that you had the Grace course, as you called it then, on your website. I was like, this is like free college. So I was like, I was kind of excited. I love to learn. So I'm like a lifelong learner. I just love to learn. And I will, I'm actually like, I have a goal this year to read 100 books. I'm at like book 86 right now.
Wow.
So
you're on it. You're like on track.
Yeah, I know. I am. I'm going to get there. I'm a little stubborn.
Yeah. Is there a little bit of you that like, as you're looking for new books on Amazon, you're looking at the page count and you're like, I'll pick another book, There are, I am a little bit, but I just, I have like, I do audiobooks and read books. Nice. and I have listened to some that are like 17, 19 hours. So I'm not only doing short books, but now that I'm getting close, I have a few books that are shorter. I'm like, I might use those ones. Flip through some pamphlet style books.
Right. Check them. Yeah. I don't count my children's books that I read to my kids.
That's funny. Yeah. Every night get a book.
So, I just love to learn, and I do it for myself. And I was an English major, so I enjoy reading. But I thought I found your courses, and I actually I didn't even know you had like podcast version or anything. So I actually did the video part and watched the video on your website. You just sat
and looked at me talk to a camera. I don't even know why I do the videos. I hate doing them. It's so awkward, but I'm like, it needs to be a video. I don't know what else to do. So
I did for your first 3, I think. And then I realized you had a podcast version. So then I started listening and cleaning at the same time.
Double desk.
Yes. But I actually really highly recommend that those, what do you call, do you still call that the Grace? What do you call that now?
It's still there as the Grace course. Yeah.
As the Grace course. Yeah. Cause they're definitely different than these podcasts here that you're doing now. Where it's kind of educating people on different ways you can see some of these passages that we've always been taught. And so I actually recommend them to other people still, because I think it's thorough, without being too much. And, it was a great launching pad for me. Yeah. So I
look at them as kind of transitional pieces for people. That's why I leave it up. Cause people are like, I can't believe you said this in this video. And I'm like, you think I believe that? And they're like, but why is it online? So I'm like, well, some people will believe that and it'll be a helpful step in the right direction. But I'm like, it's fine. It's it's all kind of whatever, helpful stuff for someone. But so a lot of that stuff, unless it's very recent, I probably don't believe that. I don't believe the same thing I believed 6 months ago. There's no way I believed something I recorded 2 years ago. So it's just figuring out what helps people at different stages. And so I always say the Grace course is kind of for people that are still very wrapped up in, I want to be a bit more open in my spirituality, but I want to be very tethered to Christianity as I go. So maybe not tethered to my church or my box, but exactly. Mm-hmm. And so it's when you're starting to go, I want to look a little bit further beyond my box, but I do want the language to still be around the person of Jesus. I do want it to link to Bible verses and things like that, which
Yeah.
I think most people need that sort of safety. It's a bit of a comfort, you know? I think that's why someone like Rob Bell's really good, because he does pull it back and go, oh, it's like this Bible passage here or this or that. And a lot of people find that very comforting. Whereas if he just completely let go of those things, I think people would really struggle even more. I think people struggle with Rob Bell. I have no idea why, but they do.
Yeah. I mean, I remember actually like when Rob Bell's Love Wins book came out, that like I just like all these Christians that I knew were like talking about how horrible it was. And I saw a friend had it on her bookshelf. I was like, you have this book? And it's just like funny looking back. That's like funny. That like I never even read it, you know, and like we judge so many things that we actually
most people hadn't. I don't think many people had read it. So yes. I actually I've never actually read that book even still. It's a great book, but I will say most people that are usually kind of in this world have probably moved beyond it.
They're past it,
important or healthy.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. So so from that, then I found your book list and I started reading some of those. Yeah. And I just like dived in. I listened to a bunch of podcasts, like PN's The Bible for Normal People. I listened to like a lot of those, and and so I haven't stopped, I would say. Like I just because I love to learn, there's so much out there that you can read, you know? And I feel really, I guess what I would say now is I feel like really safe in the idea that I can, like, my ideas and beliefs can keep changing, and I'm not afraid of that. And so I want to just keep learning. I would say I have reconstructed. For me, I probably would be seen like in the like liberation theology type belief right now. And and I just I think that the Bible, I think all books teach us so much, and I think that there's a lot that we can learn from the Bible. But now I approach it. Okay, so Rob Bell, I think maybe I heard this saying in one of your things. Like he says that Christians open the Bible to end a discussion, and Jews open it to begin a discussion. And that's like very much how I like to see the Bible now, like just to start a conversation. And so we're going to talk about parenting some, I know. And I do that with my own kids. And it's fascinating when you do that with people, with kids, and maybe, you know, if you have other people that haven't been indoctrinated and told like, this is what you have to think.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to do once you've been established in this kind of world of like, this is the way it has to be. This is the way you have to think. Because we talk about, right? You talk about as a kid, you make a decision to be a Christian or whatever. And it's like, no. And you're like, oh no, I think for myself. And it's like, you can't think for yourself. No one thinks for themselves, right? Everyone thinks the way they've been brought up to think. And we evolve and grow in how we think. But at the end of the day, that was informed by our schooling, by our parenting, by our peers, by, you know, university, college, whatever it is, churches, they're teaching you how to think. And so even the idea of thinking for ourselves is so shaped by our society and the world that we grow in. And so it's really fascinating, that concept of how much we are told as Christians, oh, no, you're making your decisions and you're doing this. But really, you've been given such a limited paradigm that even someone that thinks radically for themselves is still, in some ways, in bondage to the world they grew up in and the world they're part of. But how much more so when you aren't even given any freedom, really. You're just told, here's your options, in or out, and this is what you need to believe to be in. Okay, any questions? By the way, the answer is no to that.
Yes.
Crazy. It's really wild. So the idea of bringing up kids in a way that you're constantly going, how can I create more freedom, more openness, more as much as possible, how do I help people think for themselves, teach them to think rather than to just agree or repeat? That's the way a lot of our schooling is that, right? It's here's the answer book, read it, memorize it, regurgitate it for the test. And then God knows if that helps or not. I'm sure it helps some people in some ways, but
yeah, I think that's a great launch pad into talking about parenting. So I do homeschool, but I think I want to talk as in a lot of the things that I think I do, like anybody can do. And you mentioned, like, how do we raise these open-minded, curious children with imaginations? And I think that's like the key to raising children, that we are not just telling them who they have to be, what they have to believe, this is how you have to see the world, but that we allow them to have curiosity and to be open-minded and to disagree with us. Even so my oldest is 9 right now, and she has a strong personality and she has a lot of like ways to see the world, I just try to like let her have a voice. And sometimes I've really learned from her even. And so I mentioned I started decolonizing first. So I'm a public school kid, public school product. And so I had planned to when we were going to do missions, I would have had to homeschool, but then we were going to stay here, and we lived in a decent school district, and I had friends that were teachers, so I planned to send them there. And when my oldest was 4, I like signed her up for preschool. It's what everybody did. There was a preschool in town that everybody sent their kids to, and so I signed my daughter up. And then that summer, I found this Instagram that was like homeschooling related, called Wild and Free, which I actually like edit and write for them now, but I didn't then. And so I just like realized that there's this way that people were homeschooling their kids that wasn't what I had seen growing up, which was like a way to shelter your kids. And I want to homeschool my kids for that reason. Like a lot of people would give them, the exact same education you're getting like in school, but like make Christianize everything, and like pull God into everything. I didn't really have an interest in that. But I saw like people were homeschooling like in order to give their kids like more freedom, like to, let them run around outside more, to allow them to like explore topics that like you just really don't a lot in public school, like arts. And it was interesting to me because like I got all A's in school. I was top 10 in my class, but I felt like I just didn't really come away with a lot. I just knew how to like get the right grades for my teachers. I could read my teachers and, do what they told me to do. And I'm a lifelong learner myself. So I was just like, I think like there's got to be a better way. And so at that point, I started reading like a few different education philosophers. So they were like all European, from like from the 1800s, like end of 1800s, beginning of 1900s, like when they were writing. Charlotte Mason was one of she's like the main one I started reading. And then I've also read like Rudolf Steiner, who is behind Waldorf education, and Maria Montessori, who's behind Montessori. And like in a lot of ways, like they are different, but in a lot of ways they kind of say similar things. And so one thing that Charlotte Mason said, as I'm reading like her books, is that so she was a Christian. And so she said, like, when you read your Bible, don't tell your kids what it means. Like you read it to them and then you let them tell you what they got from it, like what it says to them, like no matter what it is. Like if they leave parts out, you don't say, oh, but this part, and let me tell you what it means. Like whatever they get out of it, you just let them, like, otherwise it's not their. And she had this belief about every part of education. Like anything you tell your kids, this is what you're learning, they're not going to retain. But if you read them a book and they tell you back what they got from it, that's knowledge that they've taken and made their own. And so specifically with the Bible, because at that point, like I hadn't deconstructed in any way, I was like, I was a little bit afraid. I was like, what, how do you know that they like believe the right things then, like you have to tell the kids what to believe. But I like had read enough that I kind of like, I just was like, I'm going to trust this, and I actually, I like educate my kids completely like that now, where like we read things together or we watch things together, and I'm like, tell me what you got from it. Tell me what it said. And now, like with my oldest, we have a discussion more. And, she'll share what she thinks, and then, we might have a discussion about it. But I've realized it's just really, really neat when you approach things like that. So for instance, like with the Bible, so I do still read the Bible to my girls. I know like some people say, so, you have all kinds of listeners, and some of them need to stay completely away from the Bible because it's, hurt them so much. Sure. But I'm guessing you'll have some that are also like, I want to give my kids the Bible and I just don't know how. And absolutely. So I want to speak a little bit to that. So I know like there's a number of people that think like just focus on the stories of Jesus. I think like PNs would have that approach. I think like the life of Jesus is really great. And I do read those to my kids, like, and like the parables are great stories, that you learn things from. But children like love mythology and like, they love those old stories. And so like, I think what, feels toxic to us is like that, some of them have been, ruined for us because we weren't allowed to have any curiosity within them, and also we live in an age of reason. And like, so we like look at those stories and we're like, well, we don't want to indoctrinate our kids and like make them think like that there was like, actually like this flood and like only one person was sick, and I think what we need to like, so I'm an English person and I love story. And so I think that, we like just need to let children have like wonder over these stories, so we're not like indoctrinating our children when we read them. We're like sharing our heritage with them, and they're just like I read mythology to my kids too. I mean, like, and so this is like a story that is just like amazing, like a big flood story, and like it sticks in their minds, and they don't need to like have the answers, and they don't care about having all the answers, what about like the truth of this story, or like how it relates to them. Like it's just a story to them, and later on they'll like, they'll continue to build on it. And I think a big part of parenting is just trusting the process that kids like will continually build on the knowledge they have and come to their own conclusions, and that they don't need it all when they're 7. So I think like those decisions all parents get to all make for themselves. But we do, I read both like some Life of Jesus stuff to my girls, and then also some of those like big stories from the Old Testament. So I was reading through Joshua to my oldest 2, I think. And this is last year.
And when you're doing this, is this like, I would presume this is some form of like child's translation of the Bible. It's not, kind of.
No, I actually read. I read the actual Bible.
Because I was about to ask, I was like, I don't know how many kids' Bibles particularly go into depth in Joshua, because that's just a book to avoid, generally speaking, right? It's like.
Yes. So I mean, children's Bibles are hard because like they're all, like impacted by somebody's doctrine.
Big time.
So I have used them before, but one thing that Charlotte Mason, the philosopher I really like, she said just read from the actual Bible, and that also was like crazy to me at first. But we always read like short sections, like 20 verses at a time. And I think some of her thinking in that was that then you're not giving a doctrine to your kid. You're giving, the words that have been translated, but the words. So I was reading this from Joshua actually in the Bible, and so my oldest at this point is like 8, I think. Now she's 9 now, but I think she was 8, and so we're reading. I think it's Joshua 8, and it's the story about how they go up against I and AI. I think it said I, and they lose, and the people are like, oh, like, why did we lose? You know, because there's always some good reason that they lost, and not just because they're worse or anything. So they end up realizing that somebody has stolen some of the treasured things, and so they like cast their lots because they're gamblers, and they cast their lots, and like they come, you know, they narrow it down to a certain tribe, and then they narrow it down to a certain family, and then they narrow it down to Achan, and so Achan is the one that took the treasured things. And so what they do is they take Achan, and they take Achan's family, and they take Achan's livestock, and they stone him.
Yeah, it's serious, right?
Right? Yeah.
I always think, reading that story, I bet a whole bunch of people broke the rules, right? I bet it wasn't just him. Right. I bet you like a whole bunch of people had nicked stuff. Because if they're doing straws and for it to come down to him, the odds are probably whatever. But I'm like, I bet you there were so many people in the crowd sweating buckets when they're drawing the straws, and they're like, oh God, it's not my family. And bit by bit, it's whittling down towards you, and you're just like, oh shit.
Right. And then like the wife of him, she's like, what?
I'm dying for this, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I would recommend reading this story to your 8-year-old, but I did anyway.
But here we are, right?
and here we are, and I have a story from it. So this daughter, like in some ways, are very different because she's super black and white, but she's a questioner just like me, and so that's really cool. And so we finished reading it, and she's like, why would the people do that? Like, why would they kill everyone when he was the one that did it? Like, why? Like his kids and his wife and his animals. She loves animals, so she's like, his animals? Like, I don't understand that. And then she sits there for a few seconds, and she's like, and why would God tell them to do that? And so, like, I love that she can question that. That's a good question. you know, like, why would God tell somebody to stone, a whole family? And she's sometimes a little like social justice-y, where she probably was thinking like, I'm okay with them killing Achan, but like not
he should die, but
right. Right. And so like I grew up where like, I mean, I don't think I heard this story in Sunday school, but like like the story of the flood, everything was just like immediately justified. Like, God is holy. That's God has to make sure everything's clean and perfect. And so like he can like do all these things, and he's allowed to do all these things, and like we have to trust him. Yeah. And so from a young age, I just like knew I shouldn't question anything, and like everything God does is perfect. So like, I just have to like trust that. And it's been so refreshing for me to like see like I'm glad, and that's super healthy that my daughter says,
big time.
Why would God say to do that?
Because on some level, every person, right? We've all sat through a service where a passage like that has been read by the pastor, and it's like, oh, today's service, we're going to read this passage, and he's going to tell you about how important it is you don't, hide things from your family, or I don't know, like whatever this ultimate moral of this, or your entire family is going to get killed. I'm not sure how we all work this into a today's sermon, but we're going to do it. And every single person in that room, if we're honest, on some level is your 8-year-old in that moment going, but why the donkeys? Not the donkeys. What about the dogs? They don't,
right?
No,
and like
not
a
the dogs. Maybe 2-year-olds, sure, but like dogs. But it's like we've all somewhere, and we're catching ourselves, right? We're going, oh no, we don't do that. He's holy, he's righteous, it's justice, it's his ways are not our ways. Like we kind of shut that down. But on some level, I think if we're all honest, at least I am. I don't know, like other people think this, but on some level, I'm going, really, this feels a bit screwed up. This doesn't feel very just. It doesn't feel very righteous. It feels a little like vigilante-ish, like, do you know what I mean? Like an eye for an eye. Well, this is like an eye for like 5,000 eyes, you know. It's like, it's just like, it's so out of proportion, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that kids kind of
end?
reveal that in us, you know.
Yes.
They kind of like point out the thing, and you're like, oh yeah, I have wondered that as well, actually. Good point.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And so
So how do you guide that? How do you guide that conversation? So she's sitting going like, what is this? You know, like, is that something you go, what do you think? Like, how do you think that works?
So sometimes I think it depends on the circumstance, but with this one, I said, I think that's a good question. Like, what do you like know about God, or what do you think about God that makes you feel like this is odd? And she was just able to talk like how, like, she doesn't think that God would like ask people to kill people. And she thinks that like, that somebody else shouldn't die because and be killed because of another person's like evil. And so it just, like, so sometimes I'll join in the discussion. But like with this, she was able to voice all those things on her own, so so at that point I could have been like, I think you're right, like I think that like I don't want to serve a God that like says it's okay to just kill like a whole family and all the livestock, and like I don't think like I should have to die because what a man did, and I could have said all those things, but like but it's so much more impactful that like she can voice those thoughts, and she is able to think those things on her own. And also like it gives her the opportunity to like work through who God is to her. Which is something hopefully she'll be doing her whole life, And I, so I had not read Parenting Forward before. It had like been on my list. So that's like the progressive Christian parenting book, I guess, or whatever. And I had not read it before, even though it was like kind of on my list to read. But before doing this podcast, I was like, I should read it, and so I did. I read it this past week, and it's great. I would totally recommend it. A number of the things I say here today are, in line with the book. It's a quick read. So yeah, if somebody is a parent and they finish this podcast and they're like, I want to, do more. There's the book, and she also has a podcast too. But I was supposed
to be speaking to her last night actually, but she has to cancel. We're doing it next week. So your podcast may come out like the same week potentially. I don't even know. I'll probably try and space them out a bit, but yeah, I'm hammering home some parenting content for people because I don't have kids. Also, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, great. Yes, it's very good. So she has a quote from it that I wrote down because I think it's really important. So the reality is that our faith is always embedded in the historical and cultural context of our generation. My job was not to recruit my children to fight my battle against the faith system of my time, but to equip them to build faith resilience in the struggles unique to their generation.
Wow.
So I think it's important because I think we have to remember, first of all, that we're raising our children already in a different time than the one that we grew up in. But also that like our wounds and like the battles even that we're fighting now against Christianity, against, the faith that we were given, our kids aren't fighting those, like they don't have the wounds, and they don't, have the indoctrination. They don't have the same time, generation exactly they're growing up in. And I actually had an experience like this a few weeks ago. So my kids were with their grandparents and they went to church with them. And so then I didn't actually know that they were going to be going to church with them. And so when they got back home, I found out, and like, it took me like an hour to like regulate my feelings and my emotions. So it's a church I used to go to, so I know the church completely.
Right.
And I had to like kind of work through that. And I realized like I had this fear of them like being indoctrinated, or like this church is like big on like asking like little kids like to raise their hand to say a prayer. And like, you know, and I'm like, don't do that to my kid. And I just had to like realize like I am reacting to my own wounds. Like they just loved seeing their friends when they went, you know, like that's all it was to them. Like we got to see our friends and like glue puffballs on a paper or whatever, you know? And so I think we have to be careful as parents to not like react, you know, go the opposite end and react out of our own wounds. And even in that, like, I just had to even get to the point where I'm like, my kids have the right and the freedom to become full on evangelicals if they want, you know, like this is their life. And so like they, like if I tell them, you know, or shelter them or tell them like, you can't believe these things. Like I'm just doing I'm just going to the opposite end, doing the same thing done to me. And
you're making it 10 times more likely they do anyway, right? Because that's how kids work.
Especially
they will rebel in some way, shape or form, right? Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. And so I know like you talk a lot about dualism and how it's really easy when we deconstruct to just go to the other end of, and like this, like us versus them. So, you know, like we are still us versus them. We're just on a different side, you know, now, and that's still not healthy. And I think especially raising kids, it's so important to just be open-minded and allow our children to grow into who they need to, and to know that like, that they have to, you know, they have to go through stages and they have to live their own journey.
I guess that's something I was interested because you have studied a bit of spiral dynamics. You know, these models that we generally, when I'm talking about and speaking, I'm thinking about my own personal growth. I'm thinking about maybe like more societally how we're like growing or, you know, movements and things. But when you break it down and look at an individual person, we all have to go through these kind of stage by stage. You as a mother of young kids probably were much more, able to connect with some of those early stages than I was, because it's been a while since I was a kid and I don't have kids. But you're reading like warrior stage and you're going like, I've got some of those already right now. Or, you know, like it's those kind of stages. But, you know, that traditional stage where you're looking for certainty, safety, security, you're looking for a bit of boundaries, you're looking for some structure, some authority, some place to go to find answers, or at least find some sort of structure to find answers within. Like, that's a really normal part of growing as a human. You know, most parents realize when they come out of kind of like early childhood into kind of like the preteen age, things like that there is a desperate need for a bit of stability and certainty, you know, maybe age 7 through to kind of 11, 12. They're going, I want some stability. I want to know what's going on, and I'm going to trust you have some answers. And I might ask a few questions, but I really do trust what you're doing. How do you balance that component of recognizing that's a need that children have? They need a bit of stability. They need a bit of structure. Because I often think, I mean, even thinking of things like, when I have kids, like, I'm like, if them being an evangelical is what they need to form and to shape the way they need to get to, it was for me. Like, how dare I go, that's not the way anyone else should grow or develop. I'd rather I'd have found a different route to grow, personally, now looking back. But would I have been able to? I don't know. Like, if I'd been put in that other environment, would I have grown to be the person I am? I don't know. And so it's being able to take enough of a step back and go, if that's what you need, sure. Like, how do you personally, without, you know, going, oh, they need that, I'll send them to a very rigid legalistic church or something and that can work it out, or I'll send them to a state school that's very black and white and, you know, this is how it works. When you're trying to create this openness, how do you not give your kids like this existential crisis of uncertainty and there's no guarantees in the world? And do you know what I mean by that? There's got to be some sort of balance to find in that mix. And I'll say, like, being a parent, you're always trying to figure that out. So there's definitely a sense where, and especially like coming from,
the background that I came from, I mean, you're always also sometimes unlearning things. So, so I think this a little bit fits into like with like discipline and feelings. And so I'll go a little bit into those. So actually one of the first ways I learned to listen to my own intuition, my own self, despite what the church said, was to stop spanking. Like, so everything that I was given in the church was that like spanking children is healthy, not even just healthy, but like to be a good Christian parent, you should spank your kids. And like, it's not abuse because like you're calm when you do it. And, you know, you like only do it so hard and like you hug them afterwards.
This just sounds like a really abusive like person trying to like, oh no, I'm really calm while I beat my wife and I give them a hug afterwards. It's fine.
Right?
Like,
yes. Like, it's like that whole, like now when you like look back, you're like, what? But like, at the time, I mean, first of all, like I was raised with it. And then like, there's, you know, I took a class on it and I read a book on it and like everybody I know, this is like what they believe. And everybody is judging your kids and like how you're raised is judging you and how you're raising your kids. And so like, so I started out like with my oldest, like I would spank her and like, I just like did, you know, everything I thought I was supposed to do. And I just like continually didn't feel right about it. And so I just stopped doing it. Like, I was like, I don't feel right about this. But it's a little scary because like spanking your kids is a great way to control your kids. And so like you generally do have kids that like at a young age that are really great listeners and look really great to everybody. Because they're afraid, you know, they're really getting
it works great. It's a bit like the US's foreign policy, really, right?
yes,
it works great. No one's going to pick a fight with the US,
but not always healthy. And I was like, you know, like I want to raise healthy kids more, like, and I just had to get to this point where I care more about my kids like being healthy and feeling like okay with like, you know, my actions than what everybody thinks about my kids. And so I just like I just stopped spanking and then it was like, you know, learning how I had never had like parenting modeled to me other than that, and like pretty much everybody I knew, that's what they did. So it was like learning how do I, you know, kids do things that they can't do, you know, so how do I respond to this? And so, and I'm sure I don't always do it perfectly still. And sometimes I'm still like, I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but I've definitely learned a lot. And also I've realized like every kid is really different too.
Yeah.
So I have all daughters. I have 4 daughters, and my third is like full of emotions. And she, when she gets mad, she's like my screamer. So, you know, like I had 2 kids and I was like, this is easy, this parenting thing. And then like I had my third and I was like, oh, and so she's the one that you're like afraid to take to the grocery store. But so she's 6 now. So she's like growing up and she's, she's like changing and she's a beautiful human. But I've like, you know, one of the things about like not just having a hard, fast way of this is how you discipline every kid is that like you get to know your kid. And so she just like feels so much emotions when she gets upset. And a lot of times it's her feelings are hurt is what really gets her upset. And she has 2 older sisters, so it happens a lot. And she like needs to feel like she's destroying something when she gets mad. And so, so it's like learning how to like allow her to do that. But like, also we have to have boundaries in that, you know, like you can't destroy your sister and, and you can't destroy like something your sister has worked like 5 hours making. And so like, she knows her boundaries, which, so I like tell her, like, if you need to throw something, you can throw something. If you need to punch something, you can punch something, but you're not allowed to hurt your sisters and you're not allowed to ruin somebody else's stuff. So, she like, yeah, it's funny. Like it's the weirdest thing. When she gets upset, she like kind of like, she just needs to feel like she has destroyed something, but she doesn't actually have to destroy something. So she will like last week, she took the trash can. Like we have like a big rolling trash can, and I watched her out the door or out the window, and she like didn't push it over. She like took it and she laid it over. And she like one time she like amazing. I know she has like all these
like performative theater.
It's so interesting. She has like all these beads to make like jewelry, and she like took like all the colors and like threw like each color like separate on the steps. So like all the reds were on one step and all like the purples were on another step. So she didn't like
just take
organized
chaos.
Throw like, them. Yeah, she could have just like gone through like, but like I think some of it is that she like so you know, like I'm as a parent always like trying to figure out like what is it? What is she trying to like get across? Like I think some of it is like that she needs to like see a mess. And I think some of it is that she needs my attention, you know? So like she knows if she's like making a mess, even if it's not like a crazy mess or whatever, that like it gets my attention. Yeah. And she also like, she always has to clean up her mess when she's done. And like,
this is why it's not too chaotic. It's like fairly messy, but it's like, I could probably clean this up in 3 minutes.
So it might play into it. Like, I don't know. Cause we've just done this since, funny. I mean, for a while, at least, like where like, obviously like not like right when she finishes the mess, we don't clean it up. Like sometimes it's the next morning, but I'll be like, okay, honey, like we need to go clean up the mess now. And I do it with her. Like I go and do it with her. Like I think the first time she was like, can you do it with me? And I was like, you know what? Like, this is a great way for me to show her love, but she's still responsible. You know, she needs to be part of this too. I'm not cleaning it all up for her, you know, but together we can do this. We can clean up together. And yeah, you know, there are a lot of times where I think it would just be easier right now to just like spank her and like, not have a mess and have her stay in a room, and like for her to know I am the authority and I don't like this. But yeah, I don't like, that doesn't feel good at all. I don't think like she's not learning anything through that other than that, like to be afraid of me, I guess, you know? And so, yeah, so I feel like, I guess you asked about like boundaries and also freedom. And I think like that story kind of shows like how like I put some boundaries, but she also has some freedom to express those big feelings that she has inside of her. And so outside of like discipline, like I have, you know, like there's times where we will need to go somewhere. And so I'll say like, you have 5 minutes to be ready, you know, or like, there's times where like I want them to wear a certain outfit for something, but I'll say like, you have these two options, you know? And so like, I think it's just like allowing them freedom, but also like that, like they have to recognize that there is still an authority because partly because it's overwhelming for them to make like to have 800 outlets to choose from or whatever, you know, or to know like we could leave anytime in the next hour, like you decide, you know.
I want someone to be that person for me today. I want, me too, you know, if I could have a person that would go, hey Phil, here's your 2 outfits, I picked them out, which ones you want, and you need to leave in 3 minutes, okay?
Yes.
Sign me up. Where can I find that?
Narrow it down. Yeah, like I still want to make a little bit of choices, but like narrow it down for me some, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then also, I mean, like there is a sense still where like, you know, I pay for their things and I drive them places, you know, and they can't do those things yet. And so, and like my oldest struggles the most with all of these things. She just wants to be able to make all our decisions and, you know, and not have anybody tell her what to do ever. And so with her, a lot of times that we just have these discussions where I'm like, you know, I can ask you to not do this because I paid for this, you know, and I don't want to have to pay for another one. Or, you know, I can ask you to, you know, to come to the store with me, even though you don't want to, because you're not allowed to stay on your own yet. And, you know, and for now, this is the way it has to be. And And so, you know, a lot of times I feel like it's just like reminding or talking about the fact that like this is how it has to be right now. Because I like you can't have a job to make money, and you can't drive yourself places yet. So you have to have somebody that can do these things for you. Yeah. And so, I think those are probably the ways a lot of times now. I also have another story to share about that. So my oldest, who I, continually say like doesn't want authority and like, wants to do things on her own. A few weeks ago, like just, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago, not long ago. So she has a lot of righteous anger in her. And like I said, she's black and white. And so she just like, so also knowing the Enneagram helped me with her, because I realized like that I am gray and she is black and white. And so even though we're similar in a lot of ways, that is where we butt heads. And so it used to make me so mad how black and white she was, because I just wanted her to be more gray, and I think, we could also say going through the stages, like some of that is also like, she's going through some of those stages that she needs to be more black and white.
She's younger. It is a bit more black and white. Yeah.
Yeah. But since I have 4 kids, I also can see that she is just a very black and white person. And so I used to like, just be like, Sophie, that's wrong. Like, you can't like, that's not the only way you can see it. And I've learned to like have better wording. Like, this is how she sees the world. Yeah. And she's not like, she'll be like, that's a dumb way to do that, to her sisters. That's the wrong way to do it, or whatever she says. And before, it would make me so frustrated, because like, I'm like, it's not wrong. Like, but like, I've been able to see now, like what she's seeing is like, this isn't the smartest way to do it. This isn't the fastest way to do it. And so being able to like speak into that, like, you are right, honey. Like, this is actually a better way to do it. It's going to get it done faster, but it doesn't mean that they're wrong. Their main goal in life isn't to be the fastest at it. They just want to enjoy the process, or whatever it is. And so helping her to see from another person's point of view, because that's hard for her to do on her own. But then also at the same time, not discrediting her and telling her you are completely wrong with how you see the world. Right. Because she's not wrong in what she's speaking, Sure. That it's the fastest.
And her priorities are different, right?
Yeah.
I think that's an older sibling thing. I'm listening to your stories of your oldest, and I'm like, that's me. I am the oldest sibling too. And also, all the younger ones are idiots. Why are they doing it the wrong way? Why isn't it slow? Why are they stupid? So I totally get that. It seems to me like there's amazing parallels here as you're talking about this. Maybe the old models of parenting and maybe some newer ones that people are becoming more and more aware of and experimenting with, and it feels like in a lot of ways figuring out as we go along. Yeah. There's a lot of parallels here in how church and faith has been done as well. It's just in that very black and white. This is the way it is. Don't question authority. Even the concept of you do something wrong, you get a walloping. That might be a bit Scottish there, walloping. Well, that's God. That's not just the church. The church is replicating their God, and these parents are replicating the being that they're worshiping, which is you cross the line, you get a good hit. And don't do it too many times, because 4 strikes and you're out. Yeah, absolutely. And trust me, this hurts me more than it hurts me. I love you deeply, whatever. And I'm not saying it doesn't hurt parents to what, because that isn't a fun thing, I can imagine. I'm sure it's for some, and that might be something that needs to be looked at. But it's really interesting to me. I remember, so I'm Scottish. I live down in England now, but Scotland a couple of years ago made it illegal for spanking kids. And quite a few countries throughout Europe have done this now. And it was a huge deal. It even was circulating around America. People were like, oh, look at these crazy, look what will happen if you become a godless heathen country, like you won't even be able to beat up your kids. And I'm like... But it was interesting because there was only one main kind of group that opposed this kind of governmental legislation, which is based on hard data. There is overwhelming data that spanking kids doesn't work and is really traumatic long term, has mental effects and things like that. Like it's quite fairly conclusive at this point that it's not the best model. I'm not saying it doesn't work, like you said, it works. But to what end? Do you know what I mean? Do you want to create a terrorist that's going to come back and attack you one day? And creating more parallels there. But it's really interesting. The one group that was militantly against this was a coalition of different Christian denominations that had got together, and it was parents against, I don't even know what they were against not taking your kids. I don't know how they worded it. That didn't sound terrible.
What an interesting thing to fight, right?
But I was like, to me, I was like, gosh, the world, right? The evil world that's not us Christians, they are going, maybe we shouldn't hit kids. Maybe we could do this more diplomatically. Yeah. Maybe we could talk to our kids. Maybe we could try and figure out what they want and maybe have some more healthy communication and stuff like that. And it's the church that's going, no, we want the right to hit our kids. That's the right model. That's the godly model, the biblical model, whatever language you put to it. That's the Christian thing to do. And just as you're explaining, like, how you've gone about it and how it's actually drawn you closer to your kid, it's helped you understand them. It's helped you figure out how to help them understand themselves and grow and develop and figure out, oh gosh, when I get angry, I'm destructive. Like, oh, cool. Maybe I should buy a punching bag, before I get married. Yeah,
actually, that's on my list.
Right, But do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just helpful things to know about yourself. Like, and I grew up not knowing a lot of these things because I was spanked. Maybe not because I was spanked, but I can see that being a component. And it definitely didn't work for me. I was the type of kid, because I was very black and white, I was rebellious. I didn't give a crap. Hit me all day, Dad. Bring it. I am going to be your worst nightmare for it. I would go back to my room with a red butt, and I'd be thinking in my head, oh, he's going to rue this day. One day, I tell you, he's going to just really, I'm sure he doesn't actually. I don't know. I don't think my dad would be pro spanking anymore anyway, but it's just funny. It just doesn't work necessarily. And maybe it works on a few people. And maybe it does.
Well, and I was the kid that it looked like it worked on because I was terrified of being spanked. Like, I actually have very, very few memories of ever being spanked because I learned very early on, I do not want to be spanked. Not even I don't think because it hurt, but because I wanted my parents to be pleased with me. Yeah. And so being spanked meant I disappointed somebody. But I see how I can look back now and see how it played into me not knowing how to speak my own wants and needs and ever speak against wrong. So I am sure that this is not the only time I was ever spanked, but the only time I remember being spanked is when I got spanked for something that I didn't do. Oh, wow. But I never said, I never spoke up about it. Because
marked your child taking a bullet for someone. Right.
I know, my sister deserved that one. But so I think we do all respond to it differently. But I think for me, one of the big things was I just I learned to never speak up. Because I would rather just not cause any chance to get in trouble. Yeah. And so with the I have a little bit more to say about the balancing the giving them the space to learn, and then also having some authority. My oldest daughter, she a few weeks ago got mad at me because I asked her to stop hitting her sister or something like that. So she got mad at me, and I had a book in my hand, which is very normal. And she kept trying to take my book, just grab it from me. And I thought she wanted me to pay attention to her. But I said to her, if you want me to put my book down, please don't take it from me. Please ask me and say, I want you to put your book down right now. And she but she just kept trying to take it. And she gets this mad look on her face. So she tried to take it several times. And so the third time I reached out and I grabbed her wrist, and she gets this big smile on her face. And I'm like, what's going on? Because I kind of even felt a little bad about grabbing her wrist. I'm being too authoritarian. And I'm like, why are you smiling? And she's like, this is what I wanted. I wanted to wrestle. and so I realized, I learned she wants, I was like, aren't you are you afraid of me hurting you? I am not a fighter. I said before, I'm a peacekeeper. And so I like my first and my third daughter, it's really hard for me to understand like how they like need to throw things, how they need to fight, like, because I'm not like that. But I realized through this, like that, like she trusts me to not actually hurt her, but she wants me to show some authority by like wrestling with her, you know? So like, I mean, like I am stronger. So like, I don't really even have to do too much to like win. But like, I'm not going to actually, like, she knows I'm not going to actually hurt her, you know?
Sure.
And it was such an interesting thing for me because it actually, like, I realized that like the spanking, like authoritarian, like wound in me, like makes me feel like I shouldn't like do that even, you know, like any way that I can like show authority over my kids physically is wrong. And, and so it was like a learning experience for me where I realized like, you know, not every kid necessarily, but this kid right here needs me to physically show her authority, but in a way that's safe, where I'm not actually going to hurt her, you know? And it was just so interesting to, you know, to realize she's asking for me to show authority.
Yeah. Oh, I get panic about stuff like that because I like as a kid was like the least physical kid ever when it came to like wrestling with your brothers, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I'm just like, oh gosh, no, I couldn't think of anything worse. I might accidentally like hurt my finger, you know, like I'm just like, no, I don't want to do it. And so, yeah, I don't even know where I begin wrestling with a kid. I'm like, oh, you kidding? Can't we just read a book together? Or like, you know, like watch some Netflix, let's go for a walk and talk, you know, like what's wrong with you?
Right? Yeah. That's totally how I felt. I was like, I don't want to do this, but it helped her like calm down and regulate. She was smiling. She was happy after. And it was really interesting learning experience for me. And I think, I have just learned so much about my kids by not having like this hard, fast way for this is how we, you know, discipline every kid, or this is how we react in every situation. My second daughter, she kind of just needs to be by herself. She's like, you know, the sweet, quiet child or whatever. And so she like it's interesting because often she wants to like be close to people, like touch and like be held and all those things. But when she's mad, she just wants to be by herself. And she's
plotting her revenge.
Yeah, right. Probably, right. And she doesn't throw things. So just like, and the thing is that I think is so important about this is that we are all going to grow into adults where we don't have parents over us. And we need to know how to like regulate our feelings and have healthy outlets. And so, like if we are not given the time and space and ability to learn those as kids, we're going to be like toxic when we're older, you know? And so we're either going to have to go to therapy or we're going to go like, you know, do something that puts us in jail, whatever it is, you know? And you know, none of us parents are ever going to do it right, you know, so probably all our kids will have to go to therapy. But whatever like tools we can give them as kids is just going to help them later. And so, so it's a joy for me to like learn my kids and know how they're all different, but I also just have faith that this is good for them. And it's teaching them things now that they won't have to learn later or unlearn later. Yeah.
No, it makes so much sense. I mean, thinking back to like you talking about as a Christian, you know, you're kind of taught like, oh, don't have too many feelings, you know, like we kind of, we'll just stick with like the joy of the Lord and peace that transcends understanding. Key point, transcends understanding. Okay. So don't overthink that one. Just be peaceful. Okay. We don't want to see anything else. It feels like that's very much the kind of rote response for a lot of Christians. I know for me, growing up, I wasn't taught about my emotions and how to navigate my emotions, how to feel. Both my parents were very emotionally reserved. Certainly they had emotions, but they didn't show us their emotions. There was very much like, no, we're great. Everything's wonderful. God loves us. Isn't life great? But there's always stuff going on, you know, like my mom almost died. My dad had huge depression because of that and everything, but like it's still smile on the face and everything's great, isn't it? And so we weren't really given models. And so then when we felt really sad about maybe like, you know, mom being really ill or whatever, and it was still a thing of like, it wasn't, my dad wasn't capable. His parents didn't teach him about, his parents were like coal miners and like, I mean, it's a whole nother generational gap, but like, he's not sitting down going, hey, Phil, what you're feeling right now is sad. And that's really normal. And this is how it can look. And this is what we have to do. Sometimes when we work through sadness, we have to figure out a way that we can process it. Like, that was not my upbringing, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, God knows how fucked up I am. I don't know how I deal with my emotions most of the time. I'm very disconnected from my emotions, trying to work on that. And I do think for a lot of Christians, there's a barrier right from the offset because we haven't been taught to engage with our emotions, to process stuff. A lot of us have a whole bunch of trauma and all sorts of stuff that we're bringing out of our faith backgrounds. Not always intrinsically linked with the Christianity, but often I think very much influenced by Christianity.
Yes.
How did you go about, because it sounds like on some level you were kind of, at least there was an attempt to shut down a lot of your emotional responses and your emotionality. Is that a word? Emotionality? I don't know. How did you go about, because I presume for you to be bringing up kids that are connected to their emotions, you have to do some internal work on that yourself as well on some level. Is that fair to say? And
yeah,
can
definitely.
you speak to that a bit?
I think so. Yeah. So I've actually seen a therapist. I've done therapy. I still see her, not as often, but that was amazing for me. So I have had some bad experiences in the past with counselors, partly because, like, I think Christianity kind of like, like the best, like you should go see a pastor to be your counselor or whatever, And so I,
go see this person with no training in counseling to be your counselor.
Yes. So, So anyways, I was kind of, specifically when I actually started studying the Enneagram, and like realizing some parts of myself that I thought were healthy and realized weren't, I was like, I think that I need to see a counselor. And I researched a lot, found a counselor I thought I'd really like. I do. I love her. She's amazing. And she really, really helps me. So it feels really safe for me to stay in my head. And I love to be in my head and like, just, with knowledge and facts and everything. I struggled to even get into my feelings. And then also I still struggle to feel like they aren't safe or they can't be trusted. And, actually it's one of the things I ask her to help me. Like every time I see her, like, help me get into, my feelings. And, and I think like, it's been so, so helpful for me. So like when she started to do it, I actually would like feel myself like disassociating, like trying to like go right back up into my mind and like, or like, to some island, like, because I like immediately like my body is telling me this is wrong, that your feelings can't be trusted. And so I have actually done some like good work to learn how to trust my feelings and to get into them. Like I couldn't really even do it on my own. I've also read some books on like trauma and feelings and find things online and stuff about it too. And so I think if we've been raised with that framework, like I was, and I think a lot of people that grow up in evangelicalism, where feelings are bad or they can't be trusted. I do think we have to do some work. I mean, because we are fighting something that our body has accepted, that this is bad. These things are bad. And I think I have some friends that it's just easier for them to be in their feelings than for me. I think some personalities can do that better. And so for them, it might just be like, coming to the conclusion that it's okay to be in their feelings, just like learning and seeing the beauty in that, where they already know how to be in them. They just need to know that that's a beautiful thing. But for other personalities like myself, like we actually have to learn, like have somebody help us learn how to even get into our feelings. Obviously everybody can to an extent, but I was so good at like escaping them as soon as I felt myself getting into them, like just disassociating, that it was actually like some real work with another person for me to learn how to do it and how to feel safe in it. So
And I think it's so important. I mean, I think it's just important for ourselves. Like I am such a better person now because I can do that. And I feel like I know myself more fully and, like I'm a more whole person. But I think especially if we're raising kids, that's something that we have to learn to do and to be comfortable with, or otherwise we won't be able to with our kids.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like it's a cyclical thing that has to be broken. I can recognize that my inability to deal with emotions comes from my parents' inability to deal with emotions, which I can see in their parents. You know, like it's like, we can see how this is going. And at some point, the cycle has to break, right? And history has told us so far that it doesn't break itself. Yeah. Someone has to get up and do something. You have to go do some therapy, get some, help, start talking about this with your partner or whatever it is and try and like do the work. And so I think it's just a really interesting, component that I think a lot of us don't recognize how some things have influenced us throughout our Christianity, our upbringing, our within these kind of conservative backgrounds. A lot of the time we can see very obvious things. Oh, teaching kids that, you're going to burn in hell forever if you don't say a prayer. That's really tough. I'm never going to do that with my kids. And it's like, okay, that cycle's broken. Great. But actually it can be really subtle things that like, oh no, I'm just not that in touch with my emotions. And it's like, because of this, but would you have been able to be like, and do you want your kids to just inherit that natural tendency and for them to say, oh yeah, I'm just not that in touch with my emotions. Like, or do you want it to change? Do you want that to break? I think that's and that's really admirable that you've noticed that, you've gone to therapy, you've done the work like that. That's and you continue to do the work as well is a really huge thing. And I think a lot of parents, there's a lot of kids out there that are shut down and not doing well because their parents are shut down and not doing well, right? And and
I think that takes time too, which is I think why it sometimes feels like easier and safer to not deal with feelings, or like, I mean, like, to go back to spanking, like it's such a quick way to deal with something really, where like really dealing with all the emotions, allowing them to have them talking to my kids about their emotions. It's time consuming. Yeah. And it's just like hard sometimes, like, especially as somebody who, has had to do work to be in my own feelings. Like I don't want to always be in their feelings too, Yeah. And so, I do think it's a job. And at first it's, if it's not something we've done, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to, not be our favorite way to spend our time. And, and I can't, and we don't always have the time, every time if we have more than a kid, we don't have the time every time to get into all the emotions. But I think as much as we can allow them to voice what they're feeling and to talk through it, to feel it is, just helping them to grow into healthy people.
Yeah. No, it's huge. I mean, talk to me about time as well. So this is something that fascinates me because I have no time ever. And I realize I have the most time I'll ever have until probably I'm retired at this point, right? We always think, God, I'm so busy, I'm so forward, whatever. But the truth is, like, generally speaking, as things move forward, we're only going to have less time. Like things get more hectic. We have more things to our life. I'm sure when I have a kid or two, I'll realize, oh my God, I had so much free time. What was I doing with all this free time? But there is a component of, I mean, you're homeschooling as well. I mean, you don't even get to like send them to school and be like, oh gosh, some breathing time. Like you like, how do you manage time? How do you navigate all that kind of stuff? Because that seems to me, that terrifies me. When I think about being a parent, I'm like, oh my God, I struggle to get all the things I need done. How do I do that with children running around demanding a lot? Because kids require, like you're saying, it's a full-time job, this thing. It's not like you don't get to do it like 3 hours a week and be like, that was a pretty good week. I'm sure they'll be fine. Like that's not likely to happen.
So, I mean, obviously it looks a little bit different for all parents. For myself, I guess the helpful thing is that I like followed the Christian path and like had my kids young. So it's, I didn't have a lot of freedom before that. Although I do remember when my first was a newborn, that just like sitting on the couch and crying, thinking like all I was going to do the rest of my life was breastfeed her. Because it is, yeah. I mean, it is like, even if you haven't had a lot of freedom before, it is, you know, like you realize quickly, like this is consuming.
Yeah. This is at least 20 years of my life now.
Right. So, yeah, my youngest is 4 now. So I'm like counting down, no more babies. Yeah, I think, so I have a mixture of an answer. I think, when you're from a fundamentals background, you have a belief that like especially being a mother, but being a parent, like is like the highest calling. And like, I mean, literally like books and books are written about how like motherhood is the highest calling you can ever have, to like raising disciples and stuff. And while I think there's like an aspect of that is like is beautiful, that like we really do get to impact these kids. And I also think it can like really be too much of a weight. Like this isn't all I have to be, you know, I don't only have to be a mother just because I am a mother. And so I think that has been a bit of a learning process for me to like, to accept that it is okay for me to have other passions and to ask for help when I need it, you know, to take breaks. So I mean, I definitely have an aspect of that where, you know, I ask grandparents for help, and I, you know, have all the kids go outside and stay outside of me, and, you know, ask them to all sit down. Yes. Right. They always find a way in. But yeah, so, I mean, I think that we, and we live in this age where like, you know, everybody's afraid to like give their kids too much freedom. And so we have several different things coming at us as parents where like we just like can have a death grip on them and they can become our whole life. And so I think there's an aspect where I've had to learn, like, what do I need in order to be my own human, you know, apart from my kids, to be able to grow, to be healthy, to be happy. And I think like some parents, I would say probably I need that less than others, because obviously I'm homeschooling my kids. I'm with them quite a bit. And so that's going to look a little different for everybody. And I think like we just need to like have grace with what that is for ourselves and our family. I think there's another aspect though, where we get to learn with our kids. And so like, especially for me with homeschooling, like a lot of my like decolonizing has been because I have kids, which is really cool. So like we learn together a lot. So I actually write my own curriculum for my homeschool too. I'm like hardcore. So I choose all our history books, and I am very passionate about giving them, I mean, I'm in America, so giving them honest American history, you know, like they're going to really know about slavery and about like colonization and what we did to indigenous people. And we were studying the 1800s this year. So we read about the Trail of Tears, and it wasn't just like a little textbook like paragraph. We read like
reading through Joshua.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. It all connects. It really all connects, you know. It's good for them to see that we progress and that they can be part of this chain. So, so I put a lot of time into finding like good books to, and, you know, we study more than just history, but history is just such an easy area to zone in on, to say like, even if you don't homeschool, I think like we all know like what the public school is giving. Cause like, I mean, I went to a public school, and it's funny. It's so funny to me when Christians say like public schools are indoctrinating our kids. Cause I'm like, dude, like, I mean,
that's what Christian schools do, right? I mean, that's also what they do.
Yeah. I mean, like we barely touched on like real slavery. I mean, I feel like we talked way more about like Abraham Lincoln, like freeing slaves, than actually talking about how like horrible slavery was. And I like didn't know anything about the atrocities we did against Indigenous people, you know? And so like, it was all very like whitewashed and, you know, watered down. And I will say kids can handle a lot. And so sure, there is a little bit of discretion we have to show, you know, like, I mean, we read adult books and, you know, they're not going to read it and listen to exactly the same things as us, but they can handle a lot. And so my daughter, who is 9, and then my 7-year-old daughter is doing some as well. They just have had a pretty honest history upbringing so far. And I think even if you don't homeschool your kids, you can get some of these kinds of books and read them with your kids. And, you know, every country has it. We started British history this year with my oldest daughter. And so we're doing that alongside American history. And so we read about the Peterloo Massacre recently, which was like 1820-ish. And basically it's like where the Whigs and Tories didn't want the people like overthrowing them. And so they just like sent out a stampede of people to like control the masses. And instead they like killed 200 people or something. And so like we see, you know, in all of history that like this like silencing of the oppressed or of certain people. And I think, yeah, it's so good for kids to like see that, because like my oldest daughter, she like I said, she has this like righteous anger in her. And so she's already starting to like build this like real framework for like wrongs that have been done. And then I also like try to let my kids know some of the current events going on. So like when George Floyd was murdered, like I told my girls about it. And so they know that some of this stuff is still going on, that race still is having an impact on people's actions. And and ultimately, like as a white family, like my kids can be sheltered from a lot of this stuff. And I live in Indiana. So like, so my kids can really be sheltered from a lot of it. But I'm choosing to not shelter them. I don't want them to be sheltered from it. I want them to know the kind of world that they're growing up in and to be a part of change in whatever way that means for them. So I'm trying to think like what your original question was.
Oh, it's fine. We've transcended that.
We're just going. Okay, we're just going on.
I guess I'm just aware of time as well. So we've got about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So, but did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I have a few more things. So let me. Yeah, So I think books are so important, and I think especially like giving our children good history books and giving our children like multicultural books. Yeah, it just takes some work. And so I think like that's an important thing for all parents to do. So even if you're not like me, which is most of your audience, and you're not homeschooling, those are things that you can do. Like, you know, at nighttime, or if your kids are reading on their own, you can just do a little bit of research and find the books and, allow them to read more than, just like the typical books on a white kid or whatever, that they're, or just the like textbook version of history that they're getting at school. I think that raising healthy children, raising children to be a part of this world, that's something that one way that we can really help raise children that are aware and that are like ready to really care. Yeah. So that's something that I do a lot of. I had a few more stories that I just thought, knowing that, most of us are deconstructed and coming from backgrounds where we were just given like all the answers. These are stories that speak to that. So I was talking with my daughter. A lot of my stories come from my oldest because she just, she has a lot of opinions and she's older. So we have great discussions. But I was sitting with her outside this summer and we were talking about something and she was like, Mom, what are we? And I realized she was talking like politically. And so
Not existentially, like, you know, like, what is this?
Right. Well, I'll let you figure that out and you tell me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I realized it was kind of out of the blue, but I realized then that she was actually talking like politically. So she's actually already somehow gained this idea that like we are either, you know, I'm in America, we are either Republican or Democrat. But that is the framework I grew up with. Like if you are a Christian, you are a Republican is what I grew up with. And there was like, I mean, it was married. There was no thinking through it. And so it was just such a good discussion for me to like, I just said to her, I said, we are not anything. And so when you are old enough, when you're 18, you can vote and you get to decide that, you know, you get to study what they stand for and know what you believe is right and vote based off of that. And, you know, you don't have to decide the same way I've decided. And I think that it was such a neat conversation to have because I think that I grew up literally like everybody that I really intimately knew, like all voted the same way and all said it was like tied with your beliefs. And so just already giving my kids like that ability to like think beyond that, to like think not only to be able to separate the two, but also to realize like that they get to think for themselves, that they don't have to do what I do. And I really even like feel excited about that. And so now she knows like people that are voting, you know, obviously elections coming up here. So it's talked about a lot right now. And so she knows people who are voting on both sides and she likes to talk about it. And it's just like, it's been really good discussions. And I think like we need to, I mean, if our kids show interest in this, like, yeah, like let's talk to them about it, but not as in like, this is the way you have to believe, or this is how it's done.
Right. Not to correct them and make sure they vote our way.
Yeah. Yeah. Not even, you know, if you flopped, you know, like, and like it's still, we still always have to be careful of that dualism. And not that I don't ever share my views. I mean, like she wants to know my views, you know, but always to like offer them as like, this is what the conclusions I've come to, and this is where I stand right now, you know, and this is how I'm voting this year or whatever it is, you know, but never as like, this is the right way. This is the only right way. This is how you have to do it. This is, if you're a real Christian, this is how you do it, you know? And so, yeah, I think that's been a really neat opportunity. I also had an instance where I was reading a book with them that it was, I think, a book on South America. So we've been studying South America, and it talked about evolution. And I don't have to like skip those parts of the book now when I read them. We started like an interesting discussion on evolution because there's different like levels of believing in evolution. And so like, like, do you believe that we all came from one organism, or, you know, do you just believe that things have slowly changed over time, whatever it is, you know? And so it allowed for us to have this interesting like discussion. And like, I think like the book was talking about how we all came from one organism. And I actually don't believe that still. But my daughter was like, I think it actually makes a lot of sense. And she just starts like sharing why, and like, you know, things that you can see like came from other things. And it was just really like I'm sure in 5 years, she's going to think differently, you know, like she's going to keep building on these thoughts. But it was just like really neat that like, first of all, we disagreed in it. She didn't feel like she had to like believe exactly the way I did. And she was just really like kind of working it out in her mind. Like, actually, I think like this, you know, this kind of makes sense. And these are why. And so like continue like seeing the ability for my kids to be able to like build their own framework. It's been one of the neatest things I've experienced. And I think like I'm to the point now where it's not scary for me. And I know like they're just going to keep changing and, growing and building on what they know. I had one other story that is about hell. So I actually don't remember how this conversation came up, but I was with my two oldest daughters, and they started asking, like, do you really think like everybody's going to hell? And they have gone to church and stuff, and so
Right.
like they do know some of this theology and stuff. Yeah, and it just made for a great discussion how they actually started like sharing their own thoughts. And like, my oldest is just like, I don't think God would do that. And I don't think he would send people to hell. And it's kind of like maybe we should listen to kids a little more, you know, like they, you know, like they just are like, they're just able to see a fully loving God and like what, you know, and share what really feels right to them. And I think that's been really good for me too, because sometimes I'm able to even see the ways that, I have not been able to, like, I've had blinders on, you know, and I haven't been able to see fully. And so sometimes they like help me see things more fully.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It must be very rewarding, because I think this is the thing that gets in my head is like, have you seen this great movie, Captain Fantastic, I think it is, but a guy who like
I
goes
just
out
heard
and
that.
you need to watch it. It's really great. He like homeschools all these kids and like and he's got very radical views. But there's a point in it where, you know, there's a realization of like, oh, all my kids aren't going to hold exactly my radical views. And he loves that they do. And then there's a bit where you wake up and go, oh, actually, I might be just kind of shaping people into being me, but that's not teaching them to be free thinkers and whatever. And it must be very rewarding when there is an element of us that goes, I want these kids to have freedom to make their own decisions. But kids are generally speaking going to go, but mum thinks that, so it's probably right, so I'll believe that. And it must be really rewarding when they do get to the point where they go, yeah, but mum might not be right sometimes. And actually, that doesn't make sense. Like, so I think this, and even if it's ludicrous, right? Even if it's like, so clearly there's a Santa Claus. I don't know what she's talking about. You know, whatever that is. You might be like, yeah, sure, there's a Santa Claus. Great. You've figured it out, kid. Well done. But it must be very rewarding on some level for you to be like, oh, it's working. These kids are actually not just parroting what I'm saying, not just looking to go, oh, what does mom think? And I'll just agree with that, or whatever other maybe authority. Maybe they go, oh, grandma says this, so that must be right, or whatever. That must be a really great moment, a very scary moment as well, because it might come down to going, I think Trump's great, and you're like, oh my god, I hate Trump, or whatever, or Biden, or whatever your political persuasions are, right? Whatever's the big thing for us today. But it's really interesting. I guess if you got a few minutes, is that all right if we go a little over?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Sure. I guess I just wanted to ask, so because this is really fascinating to me, and this is something that I think a lot of people struggle with in this area of trying to raise kids to think for themselves, to do their own thing. You obviously have made the choice to read your kids the Bible, to you know, expose them to kind of like some of your Christian heritage, some of your Christian perspectives. So you kind of said you've kind of landed on liberation theology and things like that. How do you wrestle with that concept as well, in that, do you ever think, God, what if I'm just repeating the last generation's kind of era, where I'm now just bringing my kid up in this kind of like this world of, you know, Christianity, but just a different type of Christianity, or a different type of spirituality. I mean, it could work for anything, right? So some people come completely out of Christianity and they become an atheist, but then how do they know they're not just raising their kid in an atheist bubble, or agnostic, or spiritual, or new age, or whatever it might be? Do you go out of your way? Because in my head, I'm like, oh, I'll just go out of my way and I'll expose them to like every idea, you know, I don't even know that's possible, but you know, I'll teach my kids about new age stuff and what the Muslims think and what, like, but that seems on some level as well really kind of unattainable and complex to do as well. How do you navigate that, thinking, I want to instill like healthy spirituality, morality, these kind of things that can be really formative and important to hold, but I don't want to like lock them in. To go, this is the only way. And actually there are like very different views, like a bit like how you're saying, well, I don't have to blur out, like censor out and score out the bits on evolution in my textbook anymore. Like in the same way, it's like, oh, I don't have to score out the bits that mention the Quran or Muslims or Hindus or whatever. How do you approach things like multi-faith and things with your kids, and broader spirituality than just your spirituality?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say like, I think one of the things is like, because my heritage is Christianity, like it's obviously what I know the most about. It's what I'm familiar with. So I like took a world religions class in college, but obviously like Christian was the right one. So like, so it wasn't maybe like the most
You
fair.
just know why all the other ones are wrong.
Right. Yeah. It might not have been the most fair presentation. I also own the Quran now. So I'd like to like actually read it some for myself. And so I feel like in some ways, like I'm still like early on in my own journey of like understanding other religions, like where I can't speak too fairly to them. But so I think the most important thing is that we always like hold things loosely with our children. So like, I think what is harmful is when, I guess, like we're indoctrinating, when we're like telling our kids, like, this is the only way you can believe. This is the only way you can get to heaven. This is the only way you can be right. For me, that's like where I've landed. Like, I'm not okay doing that with my kids. So like and I'm even okay, like telling my kids, like, this is where I've landed, as long as they know like that they are allowed to land somewhere different. And so I think that's like the healthiest thing that we can do with our kids is to like give them freedom to think differently, freedom to read different things, you know, that maybe like, you know, we are a little uncomfortable with, or we haven't read yet, or that we don't understand yet ourselves. And so like, I fully expect at least my oldest to like be smarter than me in like 10 years, because she has so much freedom to explore whatever, you know. I even like the thing about Christianity is they even box in what you can read. You know, like there's a Christian market, and this is what's okay to read. And so, so we have we started, like when we started American history, we started like the earliest that we could. And so we have studied the indigenous people quite a bit. And so we've encountered, like we've read their legends, and we've encountered their religion. And we've also read mythology. And so like, that's religion, you know, too, like, where I think it's easy to feel like when we deconstruct, for it to feel like I want my kids to like have everything, you know, like to not be boxed in at all. But we also have to like understand our limits of knowledge, and we don't want to give our kids like knowledge that we actually aren't knowledgeable about. And so like, I would rather like my kids, learn about another religion from somebody that like actually, you know, is a Muslim or is Hindu or whatever, you know, because they're the ones that can fully speak to that. And so I live in Indiana. I don't always have that option of having a neighbor, you know, I often do not have that option. But I think you can do that. I think the best option is always with a real person. But if you don't have that, I think you can also get books that are like, they have like own voices, books, which are like books that are actually written by the people that, you know, believe it or grew up as it or whatever, you know, the book's about. And so I like when I read books about American Indians, I get books by American Indians, like, as much as I can, you know, every now and then, but I use websites to make sure that they are approved by Indigenous people, even if they are not wrote by them. But I think that like just trying to expose our kids to as much as we are able wherever we live, you know, so it's going to look different if you live inner city than if you live rural, or if you live, you know, whatever country you live in, it's always going to look a little different. But whatever we have at our fingertips that we can expose our children to allow our kids to be a part of that. So like, I live in a very white area. And so I have to go out of my way to expose my kids to Black people. And, I mean, really like anybody that's very different from us. But I try to find those ways that I'm able to. And so I think that is beneficial for our kids. But yeah, so as far as like religion, I think, I do desire for my kids to, be able to explore other religions. I think unless you put a ton of time into it on your own, like maybe like, the time of life you're in where you don't even have kids yet and you could do that. I think that you can't really probably do that too young. Like I'm just not, I just don't have the knowledge to like really do it with my kids right now. But like when they're able to like read on their own more and do that, like probably high school, I'm thinking, I would love them to do that. There's the book that, has like 6 different creation stories, I think, in it, that I'll probably use with my kids in like a couple of years. So that they're just aware, like there's other stories that are like our creation story, and like how are they similar and how are they different? And these are ancient stories too, they weren't like just created, to be like our creation story, and why, I mean, honestly, like understanding that there are other creation stories that are similar has only like expanded my understanding of, God and the world. And it's, like it hasn't been a bad thing. So, I think like setting our kids off on this path where they can feel safe and free to explore and know, whatever they want. And then also to not like demonize other people, so to give them a healthy worldview of people that are different from us in whatever ways we can. Yeah,
that's beautiful. I absolutely love it.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much, Alisha. Honestly, it's been absolutely fantastic. I've loved it. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your insight and your journey as well. Well done. Like, honestly, that's to hear where people start and where people are. And I think, man, I know I'm not my biggest supporter. I can be my worst enemy a lot of the time and go, oh, but you need to do this and you need to do that and you could be doing this better. But like hearing someone like you bringing up 4 young girls with freedom, with grace, with love, not spanking, figuring out, okay, how can I go about this more healthily? And it's going to be more work for me, and it's going to take more time, and it's going to require more effort from me, and I'm going to have less free time, and and I'm probably going to be pulling my hair out a little more than I would have if I just got to whack them around the butt and move on, but I want to do this right. I want to do this as best I can. I want to do it in a healthy way. I want to raise great kids. Like, that's a really admirable and amazing thing you're doing. And to be doing it in homeschooling is all the more amazing. Because I tell you, I have fantasies about homeschooling sometimes, and then I'm just like, no, not a chance. I don't want to.
It is for sure not for everybody. The public school system
I really don't think so.
And I think, like whatever is right for you, like you can raise amazing kids in all different kinds of homes.
Yeah. Well, I say that it's because my wife is a teacher. So I'm like, in a sense, what I'm saying is I have a fantasy that my wife will probably do most of that heavy lifting of actually doing the teaching. And I'll probably just come in and break them occasionally by teaching them something ridiculous. So that's really what I'm thinking of with homeschooling. It's like, you got the maths in English. Can I teach them some sort of crazy philosophy at the age of 6 that will give them some sort of existential terror? Great. Let's do this. No, it's really admirable, honestly. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share and
thank you. Thanks for having me.
To help. So how can people connect with you if they want to find out more, if they want to follow you in your journey, if they want to reach out to you? Is there ways people can do that?
So on Instagram, I am Little Women Farmhouse, and I mostly use Instagram to like talk about homeschooling and parenting. So I think that the way I homeschool goes hand in hand a lot with parenting and like just raising kids to be thinkers and world changers and stuff. So I like to talk about that on my Instagram page and post cute pictures of my kids, but usually with something inspirational. And then I do have a blog. I don't use it a lot. It's very heavily homeschool related, but there is a post that could be helpful. So I'll mention it. So my blog is littlewomenfarmhouse.com. So fairly easy to remember. But, and actually, if you go to my, my Instagram, you could link to this, but I have a post that I did with, like more inclusive history books where I have like the titles and pictures of books that we have used for history, to better cover Black history in America specifically, because that's where I live.
Sure.
And also Indigenous history. And it's literally my passion is like researching and finding those books. And so like what I share has a lot of research into it. And then I also share links at the end of that post to like, so if somebody's like looking for like the website I use to find which books are recommended by Indigenous people, like I link to that website, and I link to like website for where I get a lot of my good book recommendations from a Black mom. So that post might be helpful for some of your listeners. And then also if anybody like wants to reach out to me about book ideas, like that's my passion area, especially like, I mean, for myself too, I read a lot for myself, but I've read a lot of like anti-racism books this year and history books, but especially for kids, if you're like, I think that's just a hard area for a lot of people to know, like, how do I find the good books for my kids, especially that aren't just like the classics, you know, that are written by white men. And it's my passion area. So I'm happy to always talk about it and give recommendations about it.
Awesome. Well, people hopefully will take you up on that. I'm sure there are plenty of people that have messaged me about stuff like that, and I've gone, I don't know.
I don't read children's books.
Believe it or not, I probably should. It'd be a bit more aimed at me, I think, sometimes. Yeah. But so I have no doubt people will be listening to this and going, oh, great, I have a resource. I have someone I can connect to. And so I really appreciate you making yourself available in that way. But yeah, thank you so much. I'll let you know when this goes live. I'm not sure when it'll be. It'll probably be the beginning of November, looking at my calendar. But I'll let you know. Right. And yeah, you can brace yourself for whatever that looks like. I'm sure not much. Few people's messaging you. Thank you.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it'd be great. And I'll let you get back to your day. And you got a busy day ahead of you?
Not too much. It's our last nice day here. We're going to dip down in the colder weather. So I'm going to try to get outside.
Nice. Wonderful.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, enjoy
thank you, Phil. Great.
Yeah,
you too.
Of course. It was great to meet you.
Yes, you too.
All right. Love you. Catch you there.
Bye.
Bye.